The alarm doesn't just mark the end of sleep. For the top 1%, it signals the beginning of a carefully engineered chain reaction, one that rewires the mind, sharpens focus, and builds momentum before the world even wakes. Success, for those at the top, doesn't start with luck, connections, or even talent. It starts with what they do in the first hour of every single morning. And if you want to join them, that first hour must be non-negotiable. The top 1% don't wake up to chaos. They don't scroll. They don't rush. They design. They architect their mornings like billion-dollar projects, with every action optimized to condition the mind and body into peak state. There's no guesswork. No randomness. They wake up before the sun, not to show off, but because silence is the rarest form of advantage. In the hours when no one is calling, no emails flood the inbox, no news hijacks your brain, that's when they build clarity, momentum, and control. They don't depend on motivation. They depend on systems. And the morning system is the crown jewel. The moment their eyes open, there's a switch. Not to jump into work, but to jump into self-command. This first hour is sacred, not for indulgence, but for calibration. Mental, emotional, physical. It's not glamorous, and it's rarely comfortable, but it's always deliberate. The top 1% are not waking up early because it sounds impressive. They're doing it because results depend on it. They understand one thing most people never learn. If you don't dominate your morning will dominate you, and so will the rest of the day. Let's get something clear. High performers aren't born with better mornings. They build them. They engineer consistency through frictionless automation. From the exact time they rise, to the temperature of the room, to the order of tasks they complete, it's all intentional. The goal is to minimize decision fatigue and maximize control. Because willpower is fragile. But systems are strong. Systems don't ask how you feel. They just execute. It starts before the alarm. Most of the top 1% go to bed with the next morning already planned. The clothes are laid out. The water bottle is filled. The to-do list is refined, not overwhelming, but precise. They don't wake up and decide whether to have a good day. That decision was made the night before. Why? Because success is never spontaneous, it's predictable. When you remove friction in the morning, you make discipline inevitable. When the alarm rings, they get up immediately. No snooze. Not because it's comfortable, but because it trains the mind to win the first battle. That's the rule, never lose the first decision of the day. Hitting snooze is not about sleep, it's about hesitation. And hesitation compounds. It delays momentum. It weakens self-trust. Every snooze is a vote for who you no longer want to be. But rising on the first ring? That's a vote for discipline, identity, and control. After rising, the first act is not work, it's alignment. For many, this starts with hydration. A full glass of water, sometimes with electrolytes, lemon, or Himalayan salt. Why? Because after 7 to 8 hours of sleep, the body is dehydrated, and a dehydrated brain is a foggy brain. The top 1% treat their bodies like high-performance engines. They don't just fuel it, they optimize it. And hydration is the switch that turns the system back on. Then comes movement. This isn't about burning calories, it's about blood flow, alertness, energy. It could be 10 minutes of dynamic stretching, push-ups, yoga, a walk in the cold morning air, whatever ignites the system. You'll find CEOs doing squats, investors doing sun salutations, athletes doing breath work. It's not the intensity that matters, it's the pattern. Movement is the cue. It reminds the body that it's time to win. After movement comes stillness. Yes, stillness. While the average person dives into notifications, high performers go inward. Meditation, breath work, journaling, this is not new age fluff. It's performance engineering. The most dangerous enemy is a distracted mind. And the fastest path to focus is through presence. 5 minutes of deep, intentional breathing does more to prepare you for success than 5 hours of reactive scrolling. Many practice gratitude. not because they're soft, but because it trains the mind to see abundance, not scarcity. Most people start their day by scanning for what's missing. But the top 1% scan for what's working. Because your brain becomes what you repeatedly feed it. Gratitude conditions the mind to operate from a place of power, not panic. And power fuels better decisions, stronger communication, and consistent execution. Then, it's time for clarity. No top performer jumps blindly into their day. They prime their priorities. Whether it's a handwritten list, a digital dashboard, or a 3-bullet journal entry, they know exactly what matters most. Not 10 things. Not a full page. 3. Because clarity scales, confusion kills. The top 1% don't aim to do everything. They aim to do the right things relentlessly. And they use their morning to lock that aim in. Before they open their inbox, before they speak to anyone, they've already won. They've won against comfort. Against confusion. Against chaos. That first hour becomes a performance lab. And with it, they've separated themselves from 99% of the world who are still sleepwalking through the first half of their day. Let's talk about mental programming. The top 1% don't just consume, they curate. During that first hour, many feed their mind with intentional content. Audiobooks, interviews, affirmations, visualization exercises. They don't rely on random motivation, they use cognitive architecture. They rewire their thinking with every word they absorb. They design identity at the neurological level. And they do it every day. Visualization, for instance, is not just wishful thinking, it's neuropreplay. The brain doesn't distinguish much between imagined experience and real experience. So the best in the world see the outcome before they live it. They imagine the speech, the negotiation, the victory, not vaguely, but with precision. That mental movie becomes a script. And the body follows what the mind rehearses. Then comes the most underestimated act, doing something difficult. It might be a cold shower, a 5-minute sprint, or writing a hard message. It's not about punishment, it's about preloading discipline. When you do something uncomfortable first thing in the morning, you train your mind to stop negotiating with fear. You become someone who does the hard things before breakfast. And that identity compounds across every area of life. Notice. None of this is reactive. It's all proactive. The morning routine of the top 1% is not just about waking up early. It's about owning the first hour so completely that the rest of the day bends to your will. It's about building a fortress of habits so consistent, so intentional, that even on bad days, your system carries you forward. And this is where most people fail. They think morning routines are optional. They believe greatness is born from late-night hustle and spontaneous brilliance. But the real elite? They understand that the foundation of every success story is boring, consistent, disciplined repetition, especially in the mornings. Your morning is either a weapon or a weakness. It's either preparing you or preventing you. And the difference between an average life and an extraordinary one often comes down to how you spend the first 60 minutes. If you want the results that 99% will never get, you have to start with what 99% will never do. Wake up with purpose. Move with power. Think with clarity. Act with discipline. And repeat until it becomes your identity. This is not motivation. This is transformation. And it starts tomorrow morning. If the sun is your signal to wake up, you're already behind. The top 1% don't wait for the world to move, they move before it does. And what they do before sunrise isn't just about early rising, it's about building an invisible edge, one that compounds every single day. In a world obsessed with hacks, shortcuts, and dopamine fixes, the elite have discovered a truth too simple for most to believe. Discipline in the early hours is the cheat code no one talks about. Discipline before sunrise is not romantic. It's not Instagrammable. It's often cold, dark, and thankless. No one claps for your consistency at 5 a.m. There's no applause for choosing routine over rest, stillness over scrolling. And yet that silence. That space where there's no validation, no distractions, is where legends are born. The top 1% don't crave comfort in the morning, they crave challenge. Because they've realized that if you can conquer yourself before sunrise, the rest of the day becomes a formality. This is where the amateurs and the elite split. Amateurs wake up when they have to. The elite wake up because they choose to. They don't need an emergency, a deadline, or a boss breathing down their neck. Their internal compass is stronger than any external pressure. They've trained themselves to act before they feel like it. And that, more than talent or intelligence, is what separates them. Most people are reactive. Their mornings are dictated by the outside world, alarms, messages, meetings, noise. The top 1% build a life dictated from within. They don't just have morning routines, they have morning philosophies, systems, protocols, rituals, not superstition. Not chaos disguised as flexibility, but structured discipline that evolves into freedom. Because discipline is not restriction, it's release. It releases you from randomness, from anxiety, from regret. And it begins before the sun hits the sky. Look closely at the patterns of the world's highest performers: Olympic athletes, Fortune 500 CEOs, Navy SEALs, master artists. They may look vastly different on the outside, but their mornings have one universal trait: non-negotiable execution. Not perfection. Not complexity. Just deliberate action taken with intention and repetition. And here's the paradox. It doesn't matter what you do at 5 a.m. nearly as much as who you become by doing it. That's the secret. The actions matter, yes, but the identity they reinforce matters more. When you wake up early, follow through, and execute the plan, even if it's basic, you reinforce a self-image of someone who is in control. Someone who leads. Someone who builds, not reacts. That identity becomes your strongest asset. Discipline before sunrise is also how you escape the tyranny of time. Most people feel like there's never enough of it. That's because they give the best hours of their day to everything and everyone except themselves. The top 1% flip the script. They give the best to themselves first, before clients, before emails, before families, before fires need to be put out. They win the morning, so the day doesn't steal it from them. Let's go deeper. There's neurochemistry involved. Early morning solitude releases brain patterns that promote creativity, clarity, and problem solving. Alpha waves dominate. Cortisol peaks. Dopamine sensitivity is higher. These are not spiritual ideas. They are biological facts. Your brain is wired to think more deeply and originally in the early hours, provided it's not overloaded with junk information. That's why the best ideas often arrive in silence. Not in the chaos of notifications, but in the stillness of a dark room, a journal, and a disciplined mind. This is why so many leaders journal before dawn. Not to keep a diary, but to refine thought. To offload clutter. To surface patterns and intentions. Writing is not about documenting life, it's about designing it. A few lines of clarity in the early morning can prevent days of distraction later. The elite know that words shape worlds. And by writing first thing, they create the world they want to inhabit. Another powerful practice of the elite is environmental control. They don't just master themselves, they master their surroundings. Every detail of their morning environment is a trigger for performance. The lighting, the soundscape, the scent, the clothing, the tools, they're not random. They're carefully selected to signal the brain, it's go time. One step into that space, and identity activates. The athlete enters the arena. The writer enters the sanctuary. The warrior enters battle. These are not casual routines, they're sacred spaces for creation. This level of precision does not make them robotic. It makes them free. Because once discipline becomes default, they no longer waste time on decisions. No. Should I or shouldn't I? No. What should I do first today? No. Maybe I'll work out later. It's already decided. The system runs. And when the system runs, results flow. Discipline before sunrise also strengthens what most people ignore: emotional resilience. You see, when you push through discomfort early in the day, you desensitize your brain to resistance. The cold air, the tired muscles, the sleepy mind. You learn to operate in spite of them. And this carries into every hard thing you'll face that day: rejections, conflicts, setbacks. Your mind doesn't panic. It's already practiced endurance. You've already suffered voluntarily. So involuntary suffering doesn't scare you anymore. There's another hidden benefit: energy management. Most people think discipline drains energy. But done right, it builds it. Why? Because discipline creates certainty. And certainty reduces anxiety. When you know what to do, when to do it, and why it matters, you conserve mental energy. You spend less time overthinking and more time executing. You stop leaking power and start channeling it. And yes, there are sacrifices. The top 1% don't stay up late watching random videos. They guard their sleep like an athlete guards their body. They go to bed earlier, not because they're boring, but because they're building. They understand that greatness requires trade-offs. And they are willing to trade the short-term thrill of late nights for the long-term legacy of early mastery. This is why their discipline doesn't feel like suffering.
Hi, this is just a quick moment. If this audiobook is helping you in any way, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps me keep creating powerful stories like this, ones that make us pause, reflect, and grow stronger. A simple like, a comment, or sharing this with one friend can make a real difference. Not just for the channel, but for someone who might desperately need this message today. So thank you for being here. Let's keep building something meaningful together. Now, back to the journey.
If you win just 5 mornings in a row, something changes. Your identity begins to shift. You stop being the person who wants to wake up early, and you become the person who just does. And once that shift happens, you begin to notice something extraordinary. Life feels less chaotic, more intentional. Time slows down. Decisions feel clearer. Energy becomes stable. And most importantly, you start to trust yourself again. Because when you wake up early and execute without negotiation, you send a message to your brain: I am in charge. And that belief changes everything. Discipline before sunrise isn't about being extreme. It's about being exceptional. It's about building the edge no one sees. The edge that gives you strength when others are scrambling, clarity when others are confused, and consistency when others are collapsing. It's not easy. But it's simple. Wake up. Get up. Do what you said you'd do. Repeat until it becomes who you are. That's the path. And it starts tomorrow morning, before the sun rises. Success doesn't begin with a bank account. It begins with a brain. And the brain is most programmable in the first hour of the day. The top 1% understand this with precision. That's why their morning routines aren't just rituals, they're neurological upgrades. Every action, from the moment they open their eyes, is a signal to the brain. This is who we are now. The first hour isn't a warm-up, it's a mental reprogramming sequence. Because if you want to operate at elite levels, you don't just need energy. You need cognitive dominance. And here's the truth: your brain, every morning, is clay. The neuroplasticity is at its highest, the subconscious is most accessible, and the default thought patterns are still flexible. If you do not deliberately shape those thoughts, the world will do it for you. And the world does not care about your goals. It cares about your attention. So, if you want to build a focused, unstoppable mind, you must claim the morning before the world does. For the top 1%, the morning is when they install software for the day. Not with apps, but with thought scripts. Affirmations, visualization, internal dialogue. This isn't fluff, it's architecture. The words you speak to yourself in the morning become instructions for your nervous system. Say you're focused, and your brain aligns its resources accordingly. Say you're overwhelmed, and you're halfway to shut down before breakfast. That's not motivation. That's biology. The elite don't rely on chance thoughts. They inject chosen ones. I execute with clarity. I don't negotiate with fear. I create results, not excuses. These aren't just slogans, they're tools. Repeat them daily, and the brain builds neural pathways that default to power instead of panic. The morning becomes the forge. The thoughts become the weapons. And the brain becomes the battleground you've already won before you even meet a single challenge. Now let's talk about the body-mind loop. The top 1% know that your posture affects your mood. Your breathing affects your decisions. Your movement affects your motivation. That's why you'll find them upright, alert, present within minutes of waking up. No slouching. No scrolling. Instead, breath work. Cold water. Forward movement. They stimulate the vagus nerve. They raise adrenaline intentionally. Not to spike it, but to regulate it. They understand that if you let your physiology run wild, your psychology will follow. So they reverse engineer it. Want to feel confident? They stand tall. Want to think clearly? They hydrate and oxygenate. Want to stay disciplined? They lock their environment so friction is removed. Their morning is not random, it's a cascade of triggers. Each one leading to a state of performance before the world has even started reacting. And yes, they protect their inputs. Most people start the day by consuming trash, social media, emails, notifications. The top 1% guard their mental real estate like it's prime land in Manhattan. Because it is. What you see, hear, and believe in the first hour sets the filter for the rest of your day. That's why the elite don't just avoid negativity, they engineer positivity. Not fake hype, but high-quality mental fuel. This is where morning reading comes in. Many top performers read something that elevates their thinking. Philosophy, strategy, history, biographies. Not just for information, but calibration. Reading in the morning is different, it hits deeper. The mind is clean. The filters are off. That's why one page can change everything. It's not how much you read, it's when you read. One insight in the morning becomes a compass for the rest of the day. The same applies to writing. Morning journaling isn't about venting, it's about designing. The most effective entries? They're not emotional dumps. They're focus prompts. What am I committed to today? What emotion will I dom? Innate with today? What's the one thing that will move me forward? When you answer those before breakfast, you remove 90% of daily decision fatigue. You move through the day with clarity instead of confusion. Now here's the next layer, cognitive sprinting. The best minds do something mentally hard first thing in the morning. Not because they love suffering, but because they train their brain to wake up fast. It could be solving a problem, writing a strategy, designing a plan, planning out a pitch. It's a form of priming. Just like an athlete warms up before competition, these thinkers warm up their cognition before entering the day's noise. And over time, this sprint builds mental stamina. Most people's brains hit a wall by noon. The elite? They're just getting started. Why? Because their morning built momentum. They practiced decision-making, focus, and clarity when it was still silent. That cognitive traction carries. You don't lose it after breakfast. You expand it. And that's how they execute 10 times more with the same hours everyone else has. Let's not forget emotional regulation. The top 1% don't wake up happy every day. But they regulate before they engage. They scan themselves. What's their internal state? Agitation? Calm? Stress? They don't ignore it, they address it. Breath work if anxious. Movement if sluggish. Gratitude if disconnected. They run emotional diagnostics. Because when you know your state, you can shift your state. And when you can shift your state, you're in control. You cannot control what happens in the world. But you can always control what you bring to it. And the morning is where that control is born. That's why emotional rituals are not optional for the elite, they're embedded. Even something as simple as making your bed is not about tidiness. It's about creating a sense of order in your nervous system. It's a micro-victory. And micro-victories compound into identity. That brings us to the final mental habit of the top 1%, future anchoring. Before they step into action, they revisit the long game. They see the version of themselves they're becoming. They don't just journal today's tasks, they visualize 5 years out. And that future version? That identity? It starts whispering back. You're not just waking up early. You're building me. That vision becomes an anchor. And on hard days, it becomes fuel. Morning routines of the top 1% aren't about rigid formulas. They're about building frameworks that create mental power. They use neuroscience, behavior design, and emotional awareness to engineer mornings that prime them to win. They don't chase productivity. They build identity. And identity drives execution. This is not a motivational message. This is a method. And the method is simple: own your inputs. Prime your physiology. Direct your thoughts. Sprint your cognition. Anchor your future. Do that every morning. Relentlessly. Repeatedly. Until the system runs without friction. Until the brain obeys the blueprint without resistance. And one day, without trying, you'll realize something powerful. Your entire life has elevated. Because your mind has. And it all started with 1 hour. Alone. Focused. Silent. Structured. Owned. Energy is not a mystery. It's not luck. And it's not something the top 1% leave to chance. They understand energy as a currency. A form of capital that either gets invested, wasted, or multiplied. And their morning routines are built around mastering this invisible force before anyone else even opens their eyes. Because without energy, intelligence is useless, focus collapses, and discipline deteriorates. If success is the vehicle, then energy is the fuel. And the top 1% make sure their tank is full before they ever hit the accelerator. But here's the twist: they don't chase energy, they create it. From the moment they wake up, they engineer their internal chemistry to generate sustained, stable power. Not chaotic surges. Not caffeine dependence. But real, clean, focused energy that lasts from the first hour of the morning into the most demanding parts of the day. How? Through a cocktail of biology, behavior, and belief. Let's start with light. The most elite performers understand that sunlight is not optional, it's neurological ignition. Exposure to natural light in the first 30 minutes of waking is one of the fastest ways to reset the body's circadian rhythm, elevate serotonin, and trigger dopamine. It's not spiritual, it's chemical. The light enters the eyes, signals the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, and your entire system updates. It's time to wake up. It's time to go. The top 1% don't just walk into light, they seek it. Window open. Face toward the sun. Sometimes a walk. Sometimes breath work on the balcony. Always intentional. Then comes movement, not for fitness, but for energy distribution. The body is the warehouse of potential energy. But if it's stagnant, that energy never flows. That's why you'll find the elite doing bodyweight routines, light cardio, yoga flows, or primal movement patterns within the first 20 minutes of waking. Why? Because movement stimulates blood flow, triggers endorphins, activates lymphatic drainage, and signals alertness. Most importantly, it shifts their emotional state. Motion is a tool. A reset. A lever to pull when they need clarity. Next, hydration. The average person wakes up dehydrated, inflamed, and foggy. The top 1% fix that immediately. Before coffee. Before food. Before screens. A liter of water, sometimes with sea salt, lemon, or trace minerals. They understand that dehydration decreases brain function, reduces endurance, and elevates cortisol. Rehydration is not a luxury. It's a performance standard. That one simple act begins restoring metabolic function, cognitive clarity, and cellular repair. But hydration is just part of the equation. Nutrition is the next pillar. Most people spike their blood sugar in the first hour and crash by 10 a.m. Not the elite. They eat with intention. Some fast. Some don't. But all of them understand one thing: food is information. And the first signals you send to your body dictate how it performs for the rest of the day. Protein. Healthy fats. Clean carbs. No sugar spikes. No inflammatory junk. This isn't about diet culture. This is about operational readiness. What you put in your body before 9 a.m. is what your brain will use to think with for the next 8 hours. Let's go deeper, into breath. Yes, breath. One of the most underrated performance tools in the world. The top 1% use specific breathing techniques in the morning to regulate stress hormones, balance the nervous system, and increase oxygenation. Box breathing. Wim Hof. Coherent breathing. These aren't trends, they're neurohacks. And they work because the breath is the remote control of the brain. If you want calm, breathe slow. If you want energy, breathe deep. If you want clarity, breathe rhythmically. 5 minutes of breath work in the morning is the difference between reacting from fear and acting from power. Sleep is part of the morning routine too. It just happens 8 hours earlier. The elite know you can't fake energy. And they don't wear sleep deprivation like a badge of honor. They treat sleep like elite athletes treat recovery. They use trackers. They engineer their sleep environments. Cold rooms. No screens. Magnesium. Wind down rituals. Why? Because they don't just want to wake up. They want to wake up ready. Sleep is the prequel to the morning. And they respect it. They also control their stimulation. Most people are addicted to dopamine without knowing it. Their phones spike it within seconds of waking. But the top 1% delay that hit. They resist the pull of easy rewards in the morning. No social media. No endless scrolling. Why?
Hi, this is just a quick moment. If this audiobook is helping you in any way, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps me keep creating powerful stories like this, ones that make us pause, reflect, and grow stronger. A simple like, a comment, or sharing this with one friend can make a real difference. Not just for the channel, but for someone who might desperately need this message today. So thank you for being here. Let's keep building something meaningful together. Now, back to the journey.
That's why the top 1% don't just follow routines. They connect them to a bigger purpose. They don't work out because they should. They do it because they see themselves as warriors, as leaders, as examples. That identity pulls them out of bed faster than any alarm ever could. They also use micro wins to accelerate energy. What does that mean? It means they stack tiny victories in the first 60 minutes. Making the bed. Completing a journal entry. Finishing a hard set. Sending a strategic message. These aren't just tasks, they're triggers. Each one builds a sense of agency. I did what I said I would. That feeling? That self-trust? It's more energizing than caffeine. Because energy without direction is chaos. But energy anchored in confidence? That's power. The best part? They've turned this all into a system. It's not about feeling motivated. It's about reducing friction. The clothes are laid out. The water is ready. The workout is scheduled. The room is cold. The tools are there. No thinking. Just doing. Just stacking. Just building energy brick by brick until it becomes a fortress. A launch pad. A weapon. And if they miss a day, they reset. Quickly. No spiraling. No guilt. Because the routine isn't about perfection, it's about rhythm. About returning. About remembering who they are and what they're here to do. They don't punish themselves. They re-enter the system. And the system restores their energy. In a world where most people start their day depleted, distracted, and disoriented, the top 1% rise with clarity, charge with discipline, and execute with energy that lasts until the mission is complete. This is not an accident. It's not luck. It's a blueprint. So if you're tired of being tired, stop waiting to feel better. Build the system. Protect the inputs. Breathe. Move. Hydrate. Align. Repeat. And don't stop until the way you feel matches the future you're building. This is energy mastery. And it starts every single morning. Motivation is a myth. At least, that's what the top 1% understand better than anyone. They know that the people who rely on motivation to act will always be outperformed by the people who rely on systems. Systems that don't care how you feel. Systems that run when you're tired, stressed, unmotivated, or even broken. Because in the game of high performance, it's not the most inspired who win, it's the most consistent. And consistency is born from one thing, a morning routine that works without needing you to want it. Most people wait to feel ready. They wait to be inspired. But the elite don't wait, they execute. Not because they're robots, but because they've engineered their mornings to remove friction and build flow. They've taken the thinking out of the equation. And when you stop negotiating with your feelings, you start performing at levels no one else can match. Let's break it down. Every system begins with one principle: automation beats willpower. Willpower is a battery. It depletes. But automation? That's electricity. That's wiring. That's power that flows without your permission. The top 1% know that if you design your morning to run automatically, you'll win more days than anyone relying on emotion or hype. They don't wake up and decide what to do. The decisions are already made. The time they wake up? Non-negotiable. The first action? Locked. The sequence of habits? Predetermined. They wake up, step into a blueprint, and the blueprint pulls them forward. There's no battle. No question. Just action. It starts with environment design. You want to wake up early? Start the night before. Set the room temperature. Place your shoes at the door. Set your clothes where you'll see them. Prepare your water bottle. Write your top 3 priorities on a sticky note next to your bed. When you open your eyes, everything is ready. The fewer decisions you make in the morning, the more decisions you'll win throughout the day. This is where most people fail. They rely on memory. On chance. But the top 1% build cues into their environment. Visual triggers. Physical anchors. You wake up and see your shoes? That's the signal to move. You see the journal on the table? That's the signal to reflect. You smell the eucalyptus oil by the sink? That's the signal to breathe deeply and center. These aren't luxuries. They're microsignals that guide behavior. Next comes habit stacking. The elite don't just build habits, they stack them. One behavior becomes the trigger for the next. Wake up, brush teeth, drink water, stretch, journal, move, plan the day. It's a chain. One link pulls the next. And here's the magic. Once the first link is activated, the entire chain starts moving. That's momentum. That's why the hardest part is just getting up. After that, the system carries you. And when the system is solid, feelings become irrelevant. You don't need to feel like writing, you write. You don't need to feel like working out, you move. You don't need to feel like thinking, you execute your top priorities. This is what separates the obsessed from the inconsistent. The top 1% don't ask themselves, "Do I feel like it today?" They ask, "What's the next step in the system?" Let's talk about reducing friction. Every tiny obstacle is a reason to quit. Too cold? You stay in bed. Can't find your shoes? You skip the workout. Forgot your journal? You skip your clarity practice. That's why the elite eliminate every obstacle in advance. They don't leave the setup to chance. They prepare with military precision. Because they know, every second you spend looking for something is a second where doubt can creep in. And doubt is the virus that kills execution. That's why they simplify. Same morning playlist. Same water bottle. Same gear. Not because they're boring, but because simplicity frees bandwidth. The brain loves certainty. And the more predictable your environment, the more creative and decisive you can be in your work. That's not rigidity. That's liberation. Now here's the layer most people miss: emotional insulation. The best systems are not just mechanical. They are emotional buffers. The elite build their mornings to protect their state. No toxic inputs. No noise. No early arguments. No reactive habits. Instead, they design emotional safety nets: meditation, music, deep breathing, reading. So when the chaos of the world begins, they've already built a fortress of calm. This emotional baseline gives them responsiveness, not reactivity. They don't let stress decide how they behave. They've already chosen their state before anyone else touches it. And the secret? That calm doesn't come from personality. It comes from systems. Systems that create space, reflection, intention. Now let's talk about fail-safes. Even the best systems break. You'll oversleep. Miss a step. Get sick. Travel. But the elite don't collapse, they adapt. They build minimum viable routines. The 10-minute version. The hotel room version. The emergency sequence. Because something is always better than nothing. And the real goal is not perfection, it's continuity. The identity stays intact even when the full routine isn't possible. This keeps the momentum alive. One win leads to another. One breath leads to clarity. One small habit leads to focus. One day of adaptation leads to a week of resilience. That's how they protect consistency. That's how they make growth inevitable. And here's the real secret: the system becomes identity. At first, the routine is something they do. Eventually, it becomes who they are. I'm the kind of person who wakes up early. I'm the kind of person who writes before work. I'm the kind of person who doesn't need motivation to act. And once that belief is installed, everything else accelerates. They don't wake up and try to be disciplined. They are disciplined. They don't think about commitment. They embody it. And because the system is aligned with who they see themselves as, it feels natural, even effortless. You see, success isn't about doing the hard things once in a while. It's about designing systems that make the hard things automatic. It's not about inspiration, it's about infrastructure. It's not about the occasional spark, it's about the daily flame. The top 1% understand this deeply. That's why when the world sleeps in, they rise. When the world scrolls, they plan. When the world hesitates, they move. Not because it's easy, but because it's designed. This isn't about morning routines anymore. This is about identity engineering. And once you realize that identity is built by repetition, automation, and alignment, you stop trying to change your life with random effort and start changing it with reliable systems. So if you're tired of inconsistency, stop looking for motivation. Build a system. Then build your life around it. And one morning, you'll wake up and realize you became who you were always meant to be. Time is the most valuable currency the top 1% possess. Not because they have more of it, but because they own it, especially the first hour. Most people lose their days by default. The elite win theirs by design. They don't live in reaction. They live in architecture. They build time like a structure, brick by brick, beginning with the 1 hour that most people waste, the morning. And this is the truth few are willing to confront. If you do not control the first hour, you don't control the day. You might respond well, you might catch up, you might manage, but you don't own. Ownership doesn't come from surviving the schedule. It comes from designing it. And the top 1% design everything starting from the moment their eyes open. They don't rush into the day. They position themselves. They move with intention, not urgency. Because once you let urgency control your time, clarity disappears. Decisions become emotional. Focus gets hijacked. And that first hour? It becomes reactive chaos instead of deliberate foundation. That's why the elite protect it like it's sacred. The first hour is where they set the calendar of control. Not the to-do list. Not the phone. The calendar. Most people live by a to-do list and wonder why they're always overwhelmed. But the top 1%? They calendar block. They allocate time, not just tasks. Because what gets scheduled gets done. And when it's not scheduled, it becomes noise. Priority isn't about urgency, it's about placement. Here's how they do it. Before the world starts demanding, they ask, what are the 3 things I must move forward today? What block of time will I protect for deep work? What distractions must be removed to stay locked in? And they schedule the answers. Not vaguely. Not sometime this afternoon. But with surgical precision. 10 to 11:30, work on presentation. 1 to 2 o'clock, strategy review. 3:30 to 4 o'clock, relationship follow-ups. That specificity builds clarity. That clarity builds performance. They treat their calendar like a mission board, not a wish list. And it starts in the morning. Every top performer you admire? Their day is not an accident. Their schedule reflects their values, not their mood. You can tell what matters to them by what they protect on the calendar. Let's go deeper. Time ownership is psychological warfare. If you don't own your time, something else will. Notifications. Crisis. Distractions. People's expectations. They're all standing by, waiting to rent space in your schedule. And if your time isn't defended, it's surrendered. That's why the elite defend the first hour like a fortress. Because it's the only hour no one else can steal, unless you let them. In that first hour, you set dominance over time. You decide how the day unfolds. You dictate the terms. And it's not about control for ego, it's about clarity for execution. If you control the morning, you can afford to be flexible later. But if you let the morning be flexible, the whole day collapses under pressure. There's a strategy the top 1% use called active hour anchoring. It means attaching your most important, highest leverage task to a fixed time, every single morning. For some, it's 7:30 a.m. writing. For others, it's 6 a.m. strategy review. For a few, it's creative ideation or sales prep. But what's important isn't what the task is, it's that it's fixed. Same time. Same rhythm. Every day. Why? Because time blocks become identity. When you perform the same powerful act in the same time window every morning, your brain begins to associate that hour with excellence. It anticipates greatness. Focus becomes a reflex. Flow becomes faster. That 1 hour becomes your edge. While the world is still catching up. You're done with your most important work. Now contrast that with the average routine. Wake up late. Scroll. React. Decide. Rush. Check messages. Browse news. React again. That's not time management. That's time surrender. And it kills momentum before it begins. The top 1% reverse that. They build momentum early, so the rest of the day rides on the inertia. Here's something even more powerful: nonlinear time leverage. Most people think 10 hours equals 10 hours of output. The elite know that's false. 1 focused hour in the morning can be worth 10 distracted hours later. That's why they guard the morning for deep work. No meetings. No noise. Just output. Decision. Creation. Execution. This is how they outperform teams twice their size. Their mornings are productive, not busy. Productive means movement toward a clear target. Busy means motion with no direction. In the morning, the top 1% choose clarity over activity. And that one choice compounds. They also use the morning to create buffers. Instead of overloading their day back to back, they insert space. White space between meetings, reflection time after deep work, resets after sprints. Why? Because the human brain isn't designed for non-stop execution. It needs rhythm. And that rhythm is designed in the morning. The first hour includes planning not just what to do, but how to pace it. Sprint. Recover. Sprint. Recover. That's the elite cadence. You see it in athletes. You see it in top CEOs. You see it in creators. They don't sprint all day. They sprint with purpose. And the only way to do that sustainably? Start the day knowing when the sprints are. That brings us to another concept: time as energy mapping. The best don't ask, "What time is it?" They ask, "What energy do I have at this time?" Mornings are high cognition. That's for creation. Late mornings are for analysis. Afternoons might be for meetings. Evenings for review or shutdown. This isn't productivity theory, it's neuroalignment. You don't just schedule tasks, you match them to your natural energy curve. The morning is the first test. The lab. The recalibration zone. The elite wake up and listen. Where's my energy today? Where's my tension? What feels strong? And they design from there. This is self-leadership. And leadership over self always precedes leadership over results. So what does this mean for you?
Hi, this is just a quick moment. If this audiobook is helping you in any way, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps me keep creating powerful stories like this, ones that make us pause, reflect, and grow stronger. A simple like, a comment, or sharing this with one friend can make a real difference. Not just for the channel, but for someone who might desperately need this message today. So thank you for being here. Let's keep building something meaningful together. Now, back to the journey.
Because this isn't about productivity. It's about sovereignty. The power to command your hours. To live by intention. To say yes on purpose and no without guilt. To walk into the world not rushed, but ready. Time is not neutral. It's either making you wealthy, focused, powerful, or it's robbing you minute by minute. The top 1% don't tolerate time theft. They start every morning with the same commitment. This is my time. I own it. And I will use it like my future depends on it. Because it does. Before the world tests your patience, confidence, focus, or values, the top 1% have already trained for it. Before a single problem reaches their phone or inbox, they've already built the armor to face it. And they build that armor every morning. Quietly. Repeatedly. Ruthlessly. This is what separates high performers from everyone else. They don't leave mental toughness to chance. They construct it, piece by piece, before the sun has risen. Mental strength is not a natural gift. It's a result of morning conditioning. The mind is a muscle. And just like the body, if you don't train it, it weakens. It caves under pressure. It folds under discomfort. But when trained consistently, it becomes unshakable. And that training starts before the first email, before the first meeting, before the first interaction. It starts when most people are still asleep, when the noise hasn't begun and the battlefield is quiet. The top 1% know that mental chaos begins in the absence of clarity. That's why the first part of their morning routine isn't just about movement or productivity. It's about internal control, emotional mastery, thought clarity, identity alignment. Because if you don't decide who you are in the morning, the world will do it for you, and it will almost always assign you something weaker than what you're capable of being. So what do? They install certainty. Through repetition, through affirmations, through reflection. Not the kind of affirmation you post for likes. The kind you whisper to yourself like an oath. The kind that sets your spine straight and your jaw firm. I don't panic. I adapt. I solve problems. I don't avoid them. I own my time. I don't let the world take it. These phrases become scripts. And these scripts become commands. Because the most powerful system to program is not your computer. It's your subconscious. They don't wait to be confident. They command confidence through rehearsal. Through visualization. Through embodiment. They see themselves facing discomfort and overcoming it. They feel the resistance of the day ahead and prepare to meet it. This isn't fantasy, it's neuro-pre-programming. And it works. Because the brain doesn't differentiate between real and vividly imagined experience. So when you visualize yourself being strong, being calm, being unfazed, your brain believes it, and your body follows. and then they test themselves. Not through convenience, but through chosen discomfort. Cold showers, breath holds, delayed gratification, silence, stillness. These are not aesthetic choices. They're spiritual discipline disguised as physical practice. Every act of mourning adversity is a vote for resilience. Every minute spent sitting in discomfort is a deposit into the mental strength bank. They understand the truth that most people avoid. Comfort in the morning weakens the mind. The soft bed, the scroll, the warm coffee, the autopilot routine, it doesn't build power. It drains it. That's why the top 1% design discomfort into the start of every day. Not because they love suffering. Because they love winning, and they know winning requires a nervous system that doesn't flinch. Mental fortitude also comes from emotional calibration. The top 1% don't let emotions ambush them. They meet them early. They journal. They check their internal weather. They scan for anxiety, fear, frustration. And instead of avoiding those emotions, they engage. They write about them. Talk to them. Ask what they're signaling. This is not weakness, it's weaponization. Emotional intelligence, practiced first thing in the morning, is what keeps the strongest people from being derailed when life gets unpredictable. They also track their inner storylines. What narrative are they waking up with? What beliefs are still lingering from yesterday? Is today starting with guilt, or with intention? With shame, or with focus? Because they know the first 10 minutes of self-talk in the morning is the code their brain will execute all day. That's why they guard it fiercely. That's why they speak only words that activate leadership, responsibility, strength. Next, they establish cognitive control. They meditate not to feel peaceful, but to build concentration. They don't chase stillness, they practice attention. Because attention is the gatekeeper of power. A scattered mind can't lead, can't create, can't execute. So they train it, breath by breath, bringing their focus back every time it drifts. That's not weakness. That's the gym of mental dominance. And this is where most people break. They think morning stillness is a luxury. The elite know it's a requirement. You must anchor before the storm. You must hear your own thoughts before the world screams over them. And you must reclaim your narrative before someone else installs theirs into your mind. They also practice thought separation. They observe, not attach. If a thought of insecurity rises, they don't become it. They examine it. Is this useful? Is this true? Is this mine or something I adopted? That layer of awareness creates choice. And choice is the foundation of mental strength. When you can choose how to think, you can choose how to act, regardless of pressure. Now here's a hidden habit: preloaded decisions. The top 1% make their toughest decisions before emotion gets involved. They don't wait until they're stressed to decide how to respond. They rehearse it. If I'm challenged today, I stay calm. If I get rejected, I don't spiral. If something fails, I learn. These are not reactive hopes. They are strategic commands installed in the morning. This makes them unfazed when others would fold. Because while most people are operating from real-time emotion, they're operating from pre-planned identity. That's why they move with such conviction. They're not making it up as they go. They're executing who they've already decided to be. And perhaps the most powerful trait? They don't seek validation. They don't need external permission to execute their morning. No applause. No audience. Just internal loyalty. That's the mark of the 1%. They show up when no one is watching. They train their mind in silence. They get stronger in the dark. And when the world finally meets them, they're already 5 steps ahead. Because by the time everyone else is scrambling to find motivation, clarity, or purpose, the elite have already built it. They've already met the worst parts of themselves, had the hard conversations, and chosen discipline over comfort. And now, they walk into the world with an advantage no one can see, but everyone can feel: unshakable inner power. This is not a theory. This is a repeatable practice. Wake. Reflect. Test. Condition. Align. Rehearse. Execute. Every morning. Without fail. Until the world throws its best at you, and you don't break. You don't fold. You don't even blink. Because you already built the mind that can carry the mission. If energy is the fuel and mental toughness is the armor, then focus is the steering wheel. Without it, even the most powerful vehicle spins out. The top 1% don't just wake up early to look impressive. They wake up early to enter deep focus states while the rest of the world is still distracted. Because they know the truth. Success is less about doing more and more about doing the right thing with undivided attention. Focus is not a talent. It's a weapon. And like any weapon, it must be forged, sharpened, and mastered. The top performers don't wait until they feel ready to enter a flow state. They engineer it, starting from the first 30 minutes of the morning. While others check messages, browse notifications, and react to the chaos, the elite enter a zone most people only stumble into by accident: intentional, uninterrupted, high-leverage concentration. So how do they do it? First, they master mental friction. The brain doesn't like switching tasks. It's not made for multitasking. The more your attention is scattered early, the harder it becomes to refocus later. That's why the first hour of the elite morning is silent, stripped, and anchored. They protect it like a fighter protects their vision. No phone. No social media. No open tabs. No news. No clutter. It's not about doing more, it's about reducing the noise so focus can emerge. Then they use focus rituals. Every top performer has them. It might be a specific playlist, a candle, a breathing technique, a morning mantra, a uniform space. These rituals act as psychological triggers. The brain starts to associate them with the state of high performance. Just like athletes enter the court with warm-ups and routines, these individuals enter their cognitive arena with precise, repeatable steps. And the result? Flow, not by chance, but by construction. Flow is a misunderstood concept. Most people think it's some magical state that shows up randomly. But the 1% know better. Flow is the result of frictionless entry, heightened concentration, and deep immersion in a meaningful task. And it starts with the morning sequence. If you want to work deeply at 10 a.m., you can't wake up at 8:55 and scroll for an hour. The quality of your flow state is determined by the clarity and discipline of your morning. Let's talk task clarity. Focus doesn't happen when you have 10 priorities. It happens when you have one. That's why the elite don't use endless to-do lists. They have targeted priority bullets. 1. Needle mover. 1. Deep work block. 1. Non-negotiable outcome. The brain loves simplicity. And when you know exactly what to focus on, your mind enters immersion faster. Vagueness kills focus. Precision amplifies it. Before even beginning work, the top 1% walk through a mental rehearsal of their most important task. Not to daydream, but to warm up the focus muscle. They ask, what does done look like? What's the one subtask I need to get rolling? What distractions must I eliminate right now? By doing this in the first hour of the day, they prevent context switching later. They enter work with a sharp blade, not a blunt object. That's the difference between output and busy work. And they build in non-negotiable deep work windows. No calls. No interruptions. No exceptions. The same time, every day. For some, it's 6 to 8 a.m. For others, it's 8:30 to 10:30. Whatever the block, it's locked. It's holy. It's not for emails, meetings, or surface-level tasks. It's for creation, strategy, problem-solving, critical writing, decision-making. And by consistently using the same time slot, the brain adapts. It begins to associate that time with high performance. That's neuroplasticity in action. Focus becomes the norm, not the exception. They also understand the power of flow entry cost. Getting into flow has a price, time. You don't just dive in. You need 10, 15, sometimes 25 minutes of uninterrupted attention to slip into the zone. That's why the top 1% remove every possible trigger that could yank them out of focus. Notifications off, environment sealed, noise-canceling headphones on. They do this not because they're obsessed with discipline, but because they've felt the cost of distraction. They know how hard it is to get back once focus is lost. Now let's go internal. Physiological focus anchoring. The elite eat, breathe, and move in ways that support attention. They avoid sugar-heavy breakfasts. They don't flood their system with stimulants. They use breath work to regulate arousal. They train their nervous system to stay just below anxiety, where alertness is sharp but sustainable. Focus is not just mental, it's hormonal. If your cortisol is out of control or your glucose is spiking, no amount of motivation will save your attention. Let's talk about the art of saying no. Focus isn't just what you choose to do, it's what you protect by refusing everything else.
Hi, this is just a quick moment. If this audiobook is helping you in any way, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps me keep creating powerful stories like this, ones that make us pause, reflect, and grow stronger. A simple like, a comment, or sharing this with one friend can make a real difference. Not just for the channel, but for someone who might desperately need this message today. So thank you for being here. Let's keep building something meaningful together. Now, back to the journey.
Know that even focus has a recovery curve. You can't stay in the red line zone forever. But if you cycle effort and rest properly, you can hit peak focus multiple times a day. They also track it. Focus isn't left to vibes. They use journals, apps, or simple end-of-day questions. What was my most focused hour today? What broke my concentration? How can I guard that block tomorrow better? By making focus measurable, it becomes improvable. And what's tracked compounds. Finally, they link focus to legacy. They don't just want to be more productive. They want to be purposefully productive. The task they focus on in the morning is rarely random. It connects to their bigger game, mission, craft, values, vision. That's why they can lock in so deeply. The brain won't engage in peak focus for something it doesn't care about. The top 1% make sure their first block is tied to something that matters. This is not obsession. This is optimization. And it's repeatable. Eliminate noise. Anchor your ritual. Prioritize with surgical clarity. Enter deep work early. Recover with intention. Reflect. Refine. Repeat. Focus is no longer a rare state. It becomes your default. And when you stack that morning focus, every single day, for a month, a year, a decade, your results will not double. They'll explode. Because the compound interest of undistracted attention is what builds empires. The alarm doesn't just wake the body, it awakens the mind. And the first thoughts you think each morning shape the mental software you'll run for the rest of the day. For the top 1%, the morning isn't just about productivity, it's about philosophy. Their mindset isn't an accident. It's installed, updated, and uprated every single morning before the world has a chance to corrupt it. Most people wake up and inherit their mindset from the environment. The news tells them what to fear. Social media tells them who's better. Notifications tell them what's urgent. And before they've even brushed their teeth, their attention has been hijacked. The top 1% reverse this. They own the first inputs. They choose what enters their brain. They program their mindset while it's still moldable, before momentum, cortisol, and external pressure set in. Why is this so critical? Because the mind is a filter. If why? Oh, you wake up in scarcity, you'll filter the day through lack. If you wake up in self-doubt, every challenge looks like a threat. But if you wake up in sovereignty, gratitude, clarity, and confidence, then even problems look like opportunities. The world reflects the tone of your thoughts. That's why the elite take full control of that tone at the start of the day. It begins with intentional input. The top 1% don't passively absorb, they actively install. Many begin their morning with philosophical reading, not just tactical advice, but frameworks that ground them. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Naval Ravikant, Epictetus. These aren't self-help fads, they're mental maps. They're reminders that you control your reaction, your time, your attention. That nothing external has power over you unless you give it. Some read spiritual or meditative texts. Others revisit principles. Don't respond emotionally. Don't seek validation. Act with clarity. Detach from outcomes. These are not platitudes, they're sharpening stones. Because the mind, like a blade, dulls in chaos. And morning philosophy is the whetstone that restores precision. After input comes self-direction. The elite don't just absorb, they create. Journaling isn't a chore. It's an operating system update. They write to remember who they are, what they stand for, what they're building. Most people let their mood determine their thoughts. The top 1% let their principles determine their mood. They ask themselves powerful questions. What would the highest version of me do today? Where am I avoiding responsibility? What belief is no longer serving me? What emotion do I want to lead with? These questions rewire the mind. They delete viruses. They update code. And the person who walks into the world afterward is not reactive. They're aligned. They've already negotiated with their lower self. They've already chosen which voice they're going to obey today, the one that hides, or the one that rises. Another critical mindset trait? Internal responsibility. The elite never say, "I hope today goes well." They say, "I will make today count." Hope is not a strategy. Control is. They understand that uncertainty is external, but focus is internal. That circumstances fluctuate, but values don't. They don't chase a good day. They create one. By showing up with the same standard, regardless of conditions. They also train detachment. Yes, they have goals. Big ones. But they're not attached to outcomes, they're committed to process. That's why they don't spiral when a result delays. Their emotional state isn't hostage to external winds. It's tethered to internal alignment. Every morning they remind themselves, "I can't control results, but I can control effort. My identity is not tied to performance, but consistency. If I show up fully, I win, regardless of what the world says." This detachment gives them calm under pressure. While others are panicking over metrics, responses, and validation, the elite stay steady. Not because they don't care, but because they don't need external proof to validate internal truth. Next comes identity reinforcement. Every top performer knows that habits follow identity. If you see yourself as disciplined, your actions reflect it. If you see yourself as scattered, your habits follow that too. That's why, in the morning, the elite reinforce identity. I am a builder. I am a creator. I am not moved by chaos. I finish what I start. I am stronger than yesterday. These aren't affirmations for show. They are mental directives. Identity isn't something you find. It's something you install. And when you install the right identity each morning, discipline becomes automatic. Confidence becomes natural. Execution becomes inevitable. And this leads to emotional state conditioning. Before anyone talks to them, before business begins, they've already chosen how to feel. Not emotionally, but intentionally. Some mornings are wired for aggression. Some are calm. Some are playful. Some are laser-focused.
Hi, this is just a quick moment. If this audiobook is helping you in any way, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps me keep creating powerful stories like this, ones that make us pause, reflect, and grow stronger. A simple like, a comment, or sharing this with one friend can make a real difference. Not just for the channel, but for someone who might desperately need this message today. So thank you for being here. Let's keep building something meaningful together. Now, back to the journey.
To interpret it. They also revisit long-term alignment. The daily grind means nothing without a North Star. Every morning they zoom out. Not in the clouds, but to clarify why today matters. They look at their vision, their 3-year target, their legacy, and then they ask, what's one move I make today that earns my future? This keeps the morning sharp, focused, urgent, but not anxious. Because when your mind is aligned with something bigger, the small distractions don't seduce you. The gossip doesn't matter. The noise doesn't touch you. You're building something far too important to be derailed. And perhaps most importantly, they practice mental resilience before impact. They mentally rehearse adversity. Not because they're negative, but because they want to be ready. What if the deal falls through? What if the pitch fails? What if you're disrespected? The average person panics. The top 1% say, I've already played that scenario. I already chose how I'll respond. They're not surprised. They're steady. That's how you build an unstoppable mindset. You pre-live difficulty and choose your character in advance. The mind becomes steel, not when things are easy, but when it has been shaped in fire. And fire starts with the friction of early morning honesty. In the end, mindset isn't what you think. It's what you train. It's not fluffy, it's structural. And it's built every morning with input, reflection, vision, emotional command, and identity. You are either running an intentional code or being hacked by chaos. The elite don't risk it. They build the code. They update the system. And they execute on a mindset no one can give them, because they built it themselves. The world rewards the rare. And nothing is rarer today than consistent discipline and silence. The top 1% don't just have better mornings. They have better rhythms, and they've been building them for years. The difference between average and exceptional is not motivation. It's not intensity. It's duration. The elite play the long game. And the long game is built on morning ritual. Not once. Not a week. But for years. Day after day, without applause, without shortcuts, without needing someone to check on them. While others chase hacks and gimmicks, they do what works. Over and over. With boring consistency. Because they understand one thing that changes everything. The compound interest of morning discipline builds a life no one can compete with. But to sustain that discipline, it must evolve. And that's where most people stop. They create a morning routine once, and expect it to last forever. But the elite don't treat their morning like a fixed template. They treat it like a living system. Something that grows, adapts, sharpens, and reinvents itself with each season of life. That's the final secret, reinvention. Your body changes. Your priorities shift. Your energy ebbs and flows. And if your routine doesn't evolve with you, it becomes a cage, not a weapon. The top 1% review their mornings just like CEOs review performance metrics. Every 30, 60, 90 days, they audit. Is this still working? Does this routine still match my identity? What's becoming ritual, and what's becoming resistance? What version of me am I training right now? That reflection keeps the routine alive. Because mornings aren't just about what you do. They're about who you are becoming. And identity must be recalibrated often if growth is the goal. Let's talk about seasons. The best don't use the same routine for every season of life. A creator building a startup will have different needs than a parent managing chaos. An athlete in recovery will have a different flow than one in peak performance mode. That's why the top 1% don't chase a perfect morning. They build a seasonal morning, designed for the specific moment they're in. And each version still honors the same pillars: clarity, energy, focus, alignment, reflection. The tools may shift, but the principles never do. It's not about copying someone else's blueprint. It's about mastering yours, and adjusting it as you evolve. That adaptability builds trust. Because every time you update your morning with purpose, you reinforce a critical belief. I am in control of my rhythm. I lead my day. I grow on purpose. Now let's zoom out. You've built a system. You've trained your mind. You've mastered your mornings. But what's the real reason the top 1% do this? It's not just to be productive. It's to win the war before it begins. Each morning is not a checklist. It's a declaration. A decision to rise above the noise. To be the exception. To lead with clarity. To show up for a mission bigger than comfort. And here's the reward: freedom. Not just freedom of time, but freedom of mind. Freedom from reactivity. Freedom from mediocrity. Freedom from that quiet, haunting voice that says, "You're wasting your potential." That voice disappears.
Hi, this is just a quick moment. If this audiobook is helping you in any way, please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps me keep creating powerful stories like this, ones that make us pause, reflect, and grow stronger. A simple like, a comment, or sharing this with one friend can make a real difference. Not just for the channel, but for someone who might desperately need this message today. So thank you for being here. Let's keep building something meaningful together. Now, back to the journey.
Reflect with purpose. Set direction. Eliminate noise. Lock in focus. Align with future self. That's not just a routine, it's a ritual of reinvention. It's how they stay sharp while others burn out. It's how they expand while others collapse. It's how they evolve with intention. And if you've come this far, it means you already feel the truth. Your future self is waiting. Watching. Hoping you make the change that makes everything else easier. That change starts where the world isn't watching, at 5 a.m., at your desk, on your floor, in your journal. It starts when no one claps. When it's just you and the next choice. That's where it begins. And that's where greatness is built. Because in the end, success isn't about doing what you feel like. It's about doing what builds the identity you say you want, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. So if you want to lead, to dominate, to build something legendary, it starts tomorrow morning. You won't need hype. You won't need luck. You'll need only this: wake up. Step in. Execute. Repeat. Until the world no longer asks how you do it, it just watches you move differently.